progressed as I got older. So I moved with my mom once my parents were divorced to Santa Cruz, Northern California. And then her and I were butting heads, and she kicked me out of the house when I was 14 years old. So I moved back to my dad's, really dug in my musical career there. And all through high school, I was playing with like 5 different bands, literally Monday and Tuesday, one band, another band Wednesday and Thursday, another band Friday and Saturday, like clockwork, just playing all the time, different styles of music. And so by the time I graduated high school, I had a producer that was helping produce our band, and that kind of got me my foot in the door in terms of like being a professional musician. But like when my mom kicked me out of the house to move back with my father, there was there was no rules, and he was still drinking. So my substance abuse, my alcoholism continued, and it progressed. Like I remember, being a freshman in high school, and I used to drink, like a little fifth of whiskey on a Friday, and that was it. That would pretty much be it. And that was freshman year. By the time I was a junior in high school, I couldn't remember a day of the week that I wasn't drunk. Yeah. Like I was drinking every single day. Like I was like, okay, I'd have to go back and remember, oh yeah, Wednesday I didn't get drunk. So it progressively got pretty bad, and I never drank beer. I never drank in any kind of small reasonable amount. Wasn't responsible ever with it. The first time I ever got drunk was like a big cup of whiskey. So from that point on, that was my starting point, and so progressively got worse. So then once I got into like professional music world and going on tour, and that kind of exacerbated the situation, because being on tour is like one of those things where and it was a national act, and I was touring around the United States, and you play a venue, you do whatever you want for the time that you're there, and then you roll into a bus, and they drive you to the next state, and you fall out, you do the exact same thing again. You can like demolish the venue that you're playing at. You can do whatever you want, really. And me living in this rock star fantasy life, like I completely took advantage of that. I turned 21 on the road in St. Louis, Missouri.
Wow.
Yeah, I wasn't even allowed into the clubs the first half of the tour, the first leg of the tour. So yeah, St. Louis, Missouri, I turned 21.
Oh, and that explains it, St. Louis.
Man, it was crazy. That place, we were like playing by some train tracks, and there was bars there that were open till like 6 to 8 in the morning or something like that. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Very destructive. And so yeah, I mean, by the time I came back off that tour, it was like I was still living in that same kind of lifestyle, destroying venues, being a scene at restaurants. My friends were kind of like, you got to do something, because we have to see these people the next day. You know what I mean? You can't live like this. And so one of my friends had just came back from this Vipassana meditation retreat, and it had changed his life. And so I was raised Christian and Catholic, and but I pretty much was turned off from it at a pretty early age, just because like really, if you just asking questions, and it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, even just taking the song "Jesus Loves Me, This I Know," for the Bible tells me so. I remember thinking as a kid, like, so you believe anything a book tells you? You know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay, this guy loves me because this book says it. And I really started questioning, and so I kind of got pulled towards Eastern philosophies more, because that made the most sense to me. I went to this, 10-day meditation retreat, and it completely changed my perception on existence and impermanence. And for me, like it's been my basically saving grace through a lot of things. And because the Vipassana meditation specifically is not like really religious based. It's based off of like self-reflection and self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And to me, the universal truth for everything is just impermanence. Like we know for sure that everything is going to come and go, including ourselves. Yep. So to me, that's like the thing that I feel has been my truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so after meditation school, things were good. And then it like my drugs came back into my life. And as the gigs got better, the drugs also got harder. I started playing with Jennifer Lopez, and because the musical director I was working with started getting these musical directing gigs, and I was brought into a bunch of like pretty high profile acts touring Europe in a private plane and stuff like that, and that was amazing. And then, but then I also started using cocaine and getting into harder drugs and just doing really stupid shit, and being being a scumbag. Oh, excuse me, I'm not supposed to cuss.
No, you can cuss. You can say whatever you want.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and so
Gabe, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, of course.
Hey, when people were telling you, hey man, you got to straighten out, was anybody saying like, hey, you need to quit drinking and drugging, or was it more like, you got something you need to take care of, chill out, go check out this, did anybody ever question you about your use, or was it more like, you got to get some stuff straightened out?
Yeah, I mean, I was that guy with between my friends that drank more than everybody, and that's what I was kind of known for. Like they knew I would fill a big mug full of vodka or, whatever, and to just drink the entire thing, like to start the night off. So like people already knew that I had an issue, but very few people really talked to me about that, and because I felt like I had it under control. And then at the same time, if I was playing high profile gigs, like I couldn't be that messed up, you know what I mean? Like high functioning alcoholic or,
Right.
Right.
and I even almost missed a plane, traveling from one country to the next in Europe because I was so hungover.
Right.
I almost missed the plane. And, but yeah, I did, I mean, people would say stuff to me, but it wasn't, I felt like I was, a rock star. I was above everything.
Right.
Um,
Sorry to interrupt there.
no. It's yeah, for sure. Like anytime, anything. And so, yeah, I mean, by the time 2004 rolled around, I ended up getting a DUI. I blew up like a .25, 3 times the legal amount.
Mm-hmm.
I had to do a long DUI, and that was in 2004. So the laws weren't even half as punitive as they are now.
Oh man.
Um,
See, I got mine in the 80s, and my last was in 1988.
yeah,
And so at that time, I think the most I was looking at after 3 of them,
yeah.
like 6 months in jail.
Wow.
Now you go to prison.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's guys that I teach in prison, and they were there because of accidents they got in while they're drinking, third or fourth DUI for sure.
Yeah.
And even in California, I know it was stricter than it was most other places, even at that time.
Mhm.
Was it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a trip, and that was so that was 2004, and then by 2007, another drunken, just chaotic night. Ended up getting aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and domestic battery with a corporal injury, and this is my first real run-in with the criminal justice system. I was lucky enough to get a lawyer who pulled for me, and with charges like that, you generally would serve a couple of years at least,
Mm-hmm.
and but I ended up getting reduced to months. And so I had to turn myself in, went to jail for a while, a couple months, and then that's where I kind of saw the subculture of jail life and
Yeah.
a carceral institution, and like got acclimated to it. Was asked to even like have a position in the gang that I was running in, and then riots started the last like probably month I was there, and that was eye-opening experience too, because like you have being associated with a certain demographic of people like has its privileges, but when the shit hits the fan, like they expect you to step up.
Right.
That's just part of the deal. So I was expecting to get more time because we were supposed to start rioting with another gang, and luckily we went on lockdown. I got deputies would come in and pepper spray us just for fun, just because they thought it was funny, and so yeah, I mean, I made it through, fine, unscathed, and just learned a lot. And that was when I got sober in 2007, April 30th, and released a solo album once I got out,
Mm-hmm.
based off of like my experiences, sobriety, jail, death, religion. Um, and then, and that was like in 2009. I went back to school in 2010, got a degree in criminology. I started working towards a substance abuse counseling certification in the
Mm-hmm.
summers in between the criminology degree. And so, and then I got smart recovery certified in 2018. And around that time, 2018, I'm almost done here. So
Right, no, you're cool.
By 2018, I ended up getting a law school and started working for this nonprofit where we teach a rehabilitative songwriting class
Okay.
in prison, which is Jail Guitar Doors. Amazing nonprofit. And I had just graduated, with a criminology degree, being a professional musician, being sober. And I was like, somebody tagged me in an Instagram post, and I was like, this is perfect. Like, this is exactly a nice, combination of things that I've been working on my whole life or up to this point. And I, emailed the corporate office. They asked me when I could start, and I immediately started at a prison in San Diego, California. And I started law school in 2018 and ended up withdrawing from law school because I was much more interested in policy changes in California. But I mean, this whole time of sobriety from 2007,
Mm-hmm.
I got to work with the U.S. State Department on cultural exchanges, trying to get kids to stop joining terrorist organizations, in North Africa and Tunisia.
Right.
Worked on a documentary, and I went to Uganda to work with a nonprofit to get a clean water system and a solar panels on this hospital that serves like 250,000 people. And so I mean, it's just kind of bouncing around all over the place.
Yeah.
And
So of all of that you do, of all the advocacy that you do, what is it that you're most passionate about? Is it the criminal justice reform?
Right now, yeah. I mean, you know, I've seriously, my life has been like all over the place. So I kind of like whatever's in front of me, you know what I mean? I'm like, I'll do this for a while. And
Yeah.
okay, I'll do this for a while, you know, and it's kind of been like that. So right now, the criminal justice reform stuff is the biggest, because that's, I got, when I withdrew from law school, I got into this PhD program. So I'm going to be researching policy changes in California. Uh,
Okay.
for
So what
that.
needs to change? Can you talk about that a little bit about criminal justice reform?
Yeah.
What's going
Um,
on?
Well, I mean, just from my experience too, like there was a lot of policies that changed in California between like 2011 throughout 2016. They had this thing called realignment, and one thing that people need to understand too is, you know, because you know, you're hearing a lot of people from different arguments and saying that, you know, the Capitol building, you know, all these liberals wanted to free up all these, you know, criminals and be easy on crime, you know, instead of being
Right.
punitive and being tough on crime. And that's not the case. The case was that we were violating the Constitution with holding people in solitary confinement for decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Good God.
that's against the Constitution. So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the fact that like liberals wanted to free people. It's like the country's run by, you know, the Constitution, and
Right.
you're violating that. That's what happened. So a Supreme Court case told California prisons they had to basically decarcerate, and so that kind of led to all these policy changes. One was realignment, sending people, you know, that in prison down to the county level, and
Right.
which was in some ways good. You know, it kind of took the pressure off of state prisons.
Uh-huh.
But you, I mean, you guys, you know, like these institutions were never made for any kind of rehabilitation.
No, they don't, they weren't.
Not at all.
You know, back when we first started in this country, the penitentiary system, it was supposed to be a reform thing, but
Yeah,
it's totally isn't now. It's total
100%.
punishment.
Yeah, you know
Yeah.
your history. That's completely right.
A little,
Yeah,
much.
Yeah, and so I mean, because California originally was California Department of Corrections. And
Yeah.
in 2005 they added the R, you know, in the acronym rehabilitation.
Yeah. How about
But
that? Yeah.
this whole time it's taken forever to actually get any kind of rehabilitative, you know, programs within the institutions. But that's when, you know, I think it was Prop 47. It, you know, made the sentences for crimes lesser, like drug crimes were considered less. You got less time. Also, like minor property crimes, and so that was a big point of contention too. I mean, I hear both arguments and I understand both arguments of both sides. But
Yeah.
specifically, Prop 57, that had to do with giving guys time off their sentence for taking rehabilitative classes,
Mhm.
and then also getting what they call milestone credits, which is like academic credits, where
Mhm.
you can get like an AA degree. You can get there's certain academic certificates that you can work towards, and you can get like up to 6 months off your sentence. And so
Okay.
that started in 2016, and that's been a big one. So,
Yeah.
and so in terms of like rehabilitation and just reform, finding the people that are willing to, you know, to take classes and get educated and program, you know, so they call it programming,
Uh-huh.
is and having the opportunities to do that has been a big one. But you know, just the bureaucracy and how behind everything is, and you know, and then trying to use evidence-based practices and everything is tough too, because
Right.
you know, the prison that I work at, I think we just got audited, and some of the CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy stuff they're doing was not adequate, and it wasn't, you know, up to standards for the state. So
Hmm.
it's been a trip, man, and I think decriminalization of drugs has been a big one too, and that's also been you know, one of my big fights, you know, in terms of like what criminal element evolves from being able to sell drugs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we got a real problem in this country with how we treat mental illness and addiction,
Hmm.
because mentally ill and people with drug addiction end up in prison more
Hmm.
than they do getting help for their problem.
100%. Yeah.
And it's like it just doesn't really do anybody any good, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah, and
So
like one of the yards that I'm on right now, it's drugs are just rampant. Like
yeah.
you know, I mean, I think people you forget like that. You know, there's in the prison system, a lot of people think there's this they have this idea of law and order,
Hmm.
and it's really just an ecosystem. You know, people are just feeding off of each other. So you have lots of correctional officers that are bringing in drugs and paraphernalia,
Yeah.
selling
Yeah.
phones. I mean, you can make $1,500 a phone. You know,
Yeah. See, they pay
and
these
so,
corrections officers almost nothing. They don't make very much money.
well, in California, some of them make six figures.
Oh, are
So
you shitting me?
yeah,
Really?
yeah,
Oh
some of
my
them make a lot
God.
of money.
See, I
And
grew up in a prison town. I mean, I went to high school in Lansing, Kansas, which is where the prison was.
mhm,
So a lot of the kids that went to school there, their parents were prison guards.
Yeah.
And they had these little tiny houses around the prison that the prison guards lived in.
Wow.
Yeah. Later, many years later, when I was sober, I took meetings to the minimum security prison in Lansing.
Beautiful.
And yeah, it was really interesting. And so it was actually an NA meeting, and so everybody there was for meth problems, and they were mostly poor people and all this. And what I found really interesting about it is, okay, I'd see these guys every week, and I'd go one week and a guy wasn't there. And what I found out is he got busted and he got sent to the maximum security prison. And the maximum security prison, from what I understood, was like really hardcore, where you are in your cell all day long. I think you get out for an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
And they would get busted for stupid things. And it was almost like I don't know what they were doing. It was like I guys didn't understand. You know, they just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they get sent somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like it just seemed kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, it's totally crazy. I mean, I mean, even in terms of like guys that have a parole date or they know that they're going home, other inmates will plant paraphernalia on them just to get them busted, so they have to stay. Like, it's really that cutthroat. I mean, you know, obviously you have to have like people that are looking to mess you up like that, you know, for whatever reason. But I mean, it happens, you know, and it's sad that people get, you know, paraphernalia planted on them and that they miss their dates and stuff like that. We got a guy
like you said, Gabe, too, it's really hard to stay out of that. It's like you almost have to pick a side for your own safety when you're in prison.
Yes. Well, and that's one of the things too that really kind of struck me was one of the yards that I'm on right now. This policy that started in 2018 is called reintegration. And as you guys know, like in the prison system, like at-risk or protective custody inmates have been separated from the general population for years, decades. And protective custody generally were always thought of as sex offenders, you know, rapists and child molesters and stuff. So they separated these inmates and put them on specific kinds of yards. They changed it to call, instead of protective custody, they call them S&Y yards or S&Y sensitive needs yards. But those populations, you know, weren't just sex offenders. They were ex-cops, because those ex-police officers have a target on their head.
Right.
Gang dropouts is what they call them. People that owe drug debts, gay, trans. There's high-profile criminals too, like guys you see in the news that are like, you know, really high profile. Their cases were covered in the media a lot. And so you have this whole demographic of people that were sensitive needs, and you got to think of like, you know, gay and trans. Like a lot of these people were sexually abused by, you know, as kids. And so the sensitive needs yards did nothing to stop the violence. Like, in fact, some of those yards got worse than some of the general population yards. So California decided to curb that whole idea and integrate the populations. And
wow,
that's what I've been seeing since I started teaching. And that's one of the things I've only seen it work on one yard so far. And that's one of the things I wanted to study, is why it's working on this one yard.
huh?
And,
So integrating actually did work in one yard.
as far as, well, I've heard in different states or different parts, different institutions throughout the state, they have integrated yards that are working. They're called non-designated, because you just basically, just to go there, you have to disassociate with your gang. And but from what I've heard, some of the yards don't have all of the gangs that are, you know, in California. So, you know, you don't see all the demographics together. You see this demographic that, say, because, you know, the Mexican mafia is split between, you know, mainly Northerners and Southerners, and then Fresno Bulldogs are like right in the middle. And you might have Northerners in one non-designated yard, but they don't have any Southerners who've, you know, historically been at odds with each other. And so it's a big mix of stuff, man. But it's very interesting to see, and also being able to talk to guys and be like, so, because I mean, you know, just spending time in jail, I knew what the rules were in terms of like, if you see a child molester, if anybody that has a sex offense, like there's a green light on them, you know, you attack them, try to kill them. And so I was asking other guys that, you know, are in the politics, and I asked them how they're able to live and be with guys that they would, you know, usually, you know, take off on and kill. And interestingly, you know, it all has to just do with rehabilitation and wanting to see your family. A lot of these guys have parole dates, and some of the guys were like, I don't care if I can't sit at your table anymore. I want to see my wife and my daughter.
Yeah.
And I, I just try to pretend these guys don't exist, and I don't talk to them. I have nothing to do with them. They are on that side of the art. I don't pay any attention to them. And that's been kind of like the sentiment I've noticed too, but it's really interesting. So it's like,
Yeah.
before I got into criminology, I was into anthropology. So studying the human species is fascinating to me.
Pretty
So,
interesting. Yeah.
oh yeah. So
Yeah.
that,
It's also, what we're living through right now with this pandemic is kind of interesting watching human behavior too.
oh,
Where,
100%.
how everybody decides that toilet paper is like really valuable.
Yeah. Right. And they just, yeah. And then, the frantic,
Yeah.
worrying about not having enough. And it's like third
Yeah.
world countries and other places have been dealing with this, it's crazy, man. It's a trip.
And
Yeah.
just how close we are from, we have this dignified society, we think, and then this little thing happens and how much more primal we get so quickly. It's really interesting. Gabe,
Mhm.
I'm blown away. Like, so you got sober in 2007. So you went to prison and you stayed sober while you're in prison?
Yeah, well, I was just in jail for months. So I wasn't serving like a super long time, and I
Okay.
was able to, but I got sober before I went in, and I used, I meditated while I was there, and it was one of those things. That's another reason why I started that secular sobriety page on
Yeah.
Facebook, because I didn't use AA. I did find a community which I felt was important,
Right.
for my sobriety, and I used, Vipassana meditation, where I could just, it was mainly like, scanning body sensations and being able to objectively look at things that come at you in life, so that you don't react to it. You stop being a reactionary,
Yeah.
and so like that helped. And then by the time I think 2011, 2012 is when I'm like, hey, I feel like there's not anybody that I can relate to in terms of like, agnostic atheist that's
Hmm.
sober, that is working other program that does
Right.
include a higher power. And also just, obviously you guys, I mean, I'm sure you're living it.
Hmm.
The idea of powerlessness versus being empowered,
Right.
and which is a big, I felt that was one of my biggest issues with being powerless, and also just labeling yourself as an addict for the rest of your life. Like,
Right.
that was kind of, I just felt like it was counterproductive, so that's when I started the page. And then, I mean, it's not like a huge page. I think there's like 700 people that follow it,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
I was surprised how many people are out there that want alternative.
Oh man, huge. It's huge,
Yeah.
and even people that might even believe in God and have a faith, they don't necessarily want it to be part of their recovery. There's
Yeah.
some of that too.
Well,
But
yeah, because even if you do, like, I mean, sorry, I was just thinking,
yeah,
because it
no,
made me think of like the idea that a God will stop you from drinking a shot of tequila, and it is willing to do that, but not feed a kid in Africa.
right,
That's
right,
just so
right.
bizarre to me.
It's ridiculous. It's crazy. I mean, yeah, it's nuts. So yeah, but because so we have like the secular AA group here in Kansas City, and we actually have people who go to church and so forth who prefer our meeting because they don't have to deal with the religious stuff. They don't want it part of their recovery. It
Yeah.
doesn't have anything to do. It's like, if you have any other medical issue or psychological issue or whatever, you don't necessarily want your religion to fix it, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Right. Right.
yeah,
That's interesting. I didn't think about that. That's very interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
Gabe, so did you spend some time or get forced to go to some AA meetings at some point? And if so, what was your reaction?
Yeah. Well, when I got the DUI, they have that, a court card that, you're supposed to go to this many meetings. And so, I mean, I think I went to one maybe, but then I just forged every signature because it's
Yeah, yeah,
anonymous.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. Not many people figure that out. I used to
Yeah.
tell people this is anonymous. No one's going to check. No one will know who signed this.
Yeah. So I just changed my handwriting, used a pencil, used a pen, used a pencil, used
Right,
a pen,
right, right, right.
and but yeah, but then the kind of the self-deprecating kind of thing that was going on, a lot of, I mean, at least some of the meetings that I went to,
Yeah.
and how critical some of the people were in AA about any other program.
Yes, that's a huge problem. That's a
Yeah.
huge problem. Yeah, it shouldn't be that way at all. And I hate that. But because from what I've read, there really isn't one way to do it. You really have to tailor the the approach to the person, and the person might want to mix and match different things. That's what I'm so interested in, is the more I learn about, what's going on in the recovery community outside of 12-step programs is really fascinating to me.
Hmm.
Because that you do see a little bit more mixing between those groups too.
Yes. And
It's
like
more,
medication is always an option too. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
use.
yeah. The thing about the one thing that you said that Ben and I talk about a lot that we think is just the key is community.
100%.
Other
Yep.
people.
Right.
Right. And even if it's not like a huge community, if it's just somebody
Yeah.
you can reach out to that's older than you, that's got more time than you do. And you know, I have to, you know, admit that I never was in AA. So like when people talk about the steps and like, and they mention certain things and they recite it like it's scripture, you know what I
I
mean?
know. Yeah.
And it's a trip. And I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about. They're like, you know, you don't have to have a
Just
higher
as well.
power. Your higher power can be this, your higher power. I'm like, okay, that's fine, you know, but
Yeah, you're much better off where you are.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
If I'm able to,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I feel like I've been sober for almost 13 years. April 30th will be 13 years for me. So
Yeah.
like, and I feel like, you know, I'm a different person. Like I feel like I've changed the synapses in my brain to think differently, even though, you know, I mean, I still have, you know, using dreams, which is a trip, you know?
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
too still after all this time.
Right. I mean, and I have these dreams where, you know, like I realize my dream, I've been drinking the whole time and not told anybody. So I feel like when I
Right.
wake up, I feel like
I
I'm
have that one quite a bit.
Yeah.
really good. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Oh yeah, just
Yeah.
wake up with like this guilty feeling, like I drank and didn't tell somebody, or I was doing it the whole time, and I was convincing myself that I'd been sober, but I'd really been drinking, that kind of
Wow.
thing. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly it. That's what happens, and it's a trip too. Because in the dream, I'm like, yeah, I've been doing this, and it's okay. Like, you know, it's okay because I've been only getting drunk in this section of the city or with these people. But yeah, but then waking up and then being relieved that that didn't actually happen. It's like the best feeling in the world.
Well, you know
Right.
what you've done is pretty amazing that so you actually have had the experience of being inside the prison, and now you actually have studied criminology and anthropology, and so you can bring the science and the
Mm,
experience to what you're to what you're to the institution.
yeah.
It's quite rare, I would think.
Yeah, well, that, you know, what's cool is like and you know how like just prison being the ecosystem that it is, and how fast news travels. You know, I mentioned smart recovery in my class like once or
Yeah.
twice, and then I had 5 different, you know, inmates coming in being like, "How can we get smart recovery started here? Can you help us? You know, I'm going to donate money to you now because the guys have money on the outside. You know, I'm going to have money sent to you. Can you get us these books and have them here so we can start facilitating our own smart recovery meetings?" And I'm 100% supportive of that because the church comes in and, you know, whatever it takes. I don't care what it takes for you to get sober, obviously, but from what I've heard, you know, a lot of the faith-based programs, I mean, they're just dealing drugs while they're there, you know.
Yeah.
And then obviously the whole idea of you know, expecting this higher power to take this feeling out of you, you know, like a lot of the guys I think would benefit a lot from cognitive behavioral therapy, because with smart recovery, it's not just alcoholism or substance use. You can apply it to criminal thinking too. Which,
Right.
For
It's
sure.
behavior. They really focus on behavior more than they
exactly.
do the addiction, which
Hmm.
I find really interesting. I still am still a third of my way through my smart training, and I better get back on it because they have like a time limit, and I
Yeah,
don't
right.
so I need to get on there before the time runs out. But
Mhm.
Well, and you were talking too, Gabe. It's like there is such an overlap with the criminal thinking and addictive thinking and
Right.
whatnot. I used to be a substance abuse counselor for a while too. So
Mm.
some people I worked with would try and separate all that out and figure out what's what. And you know, you get biases amongst counselors even where they're like, "Well, this guy's just a criminal. Get him the hell out of here. He doesn't want treatment." Or
Right.
especially in the matter of religion too. It's amazing how many people that have just come out of prison that are looking to try and get by are very religious all of a sudden.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh yeah.
I- so often I think it's just said just to make you think, hey, they're on the right path, and so you leave them alone a little bit. But that's maybe the cynical side of me. But also, I was going to ask. It seems like being a secular person feels like very important to you to make that clarification, and especially in the Latino community, that has to be a little bit more difficult, I think, because it's very highly Catholic, right? And you probably get a lot of pushback on that, I would guess.
Yeah. Well, the guys that I've talked to, they aren't so much Catholic as they're Christian now because Catholicism has just got so many rules to it,
mm,
and you know, it's kind of hard to follow certain things. Like you can't. I mean, you know, there's a lot of the prisons have every yard's got like a multi-faith thing. You know, like a room and they have different. Even Native Americans can do you know, smoke retreats doing,
right.
and then so there's options. so, but a lot of the guys that I know have gravitated from Catholicism to Christianity. And, you know, it's like, I totally get it. It's like the most appealing thing in the world, because when the whole world forgets about you, especially because most of like, I have lots of guys that have murdered somebody in my classes. And when the whole world has forgot about you, and, you know, everybody hates you, you might not even hear from your family anymore. You always know that Jesus Christ died for your sins and he still loves you. So it's
Yeah.
like very, 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 very comforting. And I get it. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to take that away from them. But specifically when it comes to substance abuse too, like it's a, you know, it's just one of those things where they have to just start thinking in a different way. And people don't realize that hoping to put a Band-Aid on it with an idea is different than living your life differently. You know what I mean? Which is, I mean, you can still, I guess, if you're, you know, following the faith of Jesus Christ, well, I don't think anybody really is except for the Amish. You know what I mean? Because it's like, he's like, you know, Jesus is like, sell everything and follow me. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
Yeah. No one really does that.
Yeah. So
So
you can't really do that.
I wonder if we can go into your art a little bit. I've had the privilege since I've been doing podcasts to speak with artists in recovery, but I've never spoken with a musician. And
cool.
I'm really interested in hearing about that part of you and the Vital Nonsense album, how you what motivated you to produce that album. And
Mhm.
can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, 100%. You know, being like a side guy or like backing up certain artists, you know, in the music community, and being part of so many different bands, like, you know, just as a musician, you write all these different parts, and then you collaborate with other musicians. And so like, there's so many songs that I brought to the table, the different bands, and once I got sober and kind of distanced myself from everybody that I was, you know, with before, all the bands and stuff, like I had all this music that was mine, you know, and I was like, I can use it because it's mine. I wrote every single part. I wrote every.
Wow.
I wrote the keyboard part. I wrote the bass part. I wrote the guitar part. And so it was just a matter of like singing and working and becoming a vocalist and becoming a lead in that too. So as like a multi-instrumentalist, like I always was listening to different parts. You know what I mean? And then also growing up playing all different styles of music, I put every kind of genre really that I like on this album. And when I was first putting it together and I was talking to my, you know, just colleagues, talking to friends that were other musicians, and every song is, when you listen to it, you'll notice like everything's very different. Like every song is almost completely different style of music even. And I asked my friends, I'm like, do you think I should separate it, you know, and release it separately with different genres, or should I just keep it on one album? And, you know, one friend said, yeah, you should release 5 different aliases and this, you know, but obviously like this is in 2009 too, like the production of making CDs, like nobody buys CDs,
No.
like physical CDs, you know, they just use them as a coaster, you know? And so
Right.
that's what my friends told me. They're just like, you're going to waste tons of money if you do that. Put it all on one CD, just release it like that. And because people are going to download one song off of iTunes anyways.
Yeah.
And so that's what I decided to do. And it actually ended up working out, because when I do my live shows, I can play whatever I want. I can play any style that I want. You know, and that's generally what I do. I'll start off like playing an acoustic guitar and singing, and you know, it's kind of like a singer-songwriter kind of thing. And then I'll start rapping. I'll put the guitar down and rap over some stuff and go like a hip hop set. And then I'll grab the bass and I'll do another rap. And then I'll do some jazz fusion, because I grew up playing like, you know, funk and jazz fusion stuff too. And then like instrumental stuff, like real, like just progressive, you know, muso stuff. And then I'll put the bass down and then just do metal for the end of the night, you know, screaming and yelling.
Did you have any sort of a fear that when you stopped drinking, that it would affect your art?
Not necessarily. Just performing was terrifying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like because I started playing when I was 14, and I really started practicing and playing gigs, you know, when I was about 15 or 16. And I look back and I remember like every rehearsal, most gigs, I was under the influence of something. I'd smoked weed, I drank a bunch of booze. And this progressed. I mean, I was always like this all the way through my early adulthood. And then when I got, you know, and I even played on Saturday Night Live twice, and I drank wine before I had gone up, playing in front of millions of people on TV.
Sure.
And then, you know, when I got sober and I played in this tiny club on a Thursday night in front of 20 people, I was terrified. I'm like, it was so bizarre, because it's like I've already done all this stuff, and now this is like freaking me out. So it took a little while to acclimate to playing live and not being drunk, you know.
And now you're comfortable with it?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's been so long now. It's like I love it, and being in the entertainment industry and seeing people drunk and sloppy in front of me reminds me of where I was too, So that kind of
Yeah.
it's kind of a
Yeah.
good healing process, I guess.
Yeah, I think that must be a myth that people think that their creativity comes from their drinking, and when they stop drinking, they can no longer be creative.
Mm.
You didn't find that.
Well, with marijuana specifically, yeah,
Uh,
because I'd smoke weed and then just play bass for hours and hours and hours and hours,
okay.
and then it was almost like practicing wasn't as fun if I wasn't high.
Uh,
But it's one of those things. It's just like different drugs will do different things.
yeah,
I always thought I was coming up with this brilliant stuff when I was drunk, and it was when I go back and listen to recordings, I'm like, that
that's
sounds
so
like
good.
Yeah.
horrible. Yeah, so it's a good reality check. You know what I mean? And like, it's wake up call.
And finally, can you talk a little bit about the documentary Shadow Nation?
Oh yeah. So George Lynch is the guitar player that I work with. He wanted to go around the United States and document the plight of Native Americans. And he hit me up just to do this movie trailer.
Yeah.
And so I did, and it ended up being perfect because I was already involved with a lot of indigenous people's rights organizations, as well as the hip hop community and a bunch of other organizations. So it's like it kind of just worked out, and he's just like, "Why don't you got to just be in the band because this other bass player that I have is not. It doesn't make sense for him to do it." So I ended up recording a double album with him, and we started in 2011, and a couple trips to Navajo Nation, like in New Mexico and stuff like that, and Arizona. And then we took one big trip, I think it was in 2014 or 13, where we went up to North Dakota,
Right.
and went and saw the Lakota Sioux. We marched with the Lakota Sioux for the first official Leonard Peltier Day. And we tried to hit as many different reservations as we could. And we got a bunch of like high profile musicians to comment on it who are activists themselves. Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. He's very known to be active in politics and stuff, and an advocate for the Native American cause. And then Serge Tankian from a band called System of a Down. He's been really big on the Armenian genocide. He's Armenian, so Armenian genocide is one of his things. So we got him. We got Noam Chomsky, John Trudell from the American Indian Movement, who passed away. Rest in peace. And so we had a lot of hard hitters to interview, and we went to Alcatraz Island as well because there's a whole history of natives taking over Alcatraz in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so it took a long time. I mean, and it's a lot of money, and and hearing really horrible stories, and seeing really kind of like how third world America that people don't see.
I know. The poverty on the Pine Ridge Reservation is like totally third world, totally third world.
Yeah.
And the alcoholism problem is unlike anything I can even imagine.
Yes.
And I wonder what can be done to help. What's the solution? Is there?
Well, White Clay specifically, they were able to. White Clay is the city that was outside. It's not even a city. It's like a strip of land.
Right, in Nebraska, where they had all the all the liquor stores. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they didn't even serve hard alcohol. They just served beer. And like, the population of White Clay was like literally, it was under 10.
Yeah. Right.
And they sold millions and millions of dollars of beer.
I see. That's what I read, that article about the White Clay.
Yeah. But luckily, the Lakota Sioux or the Pine Ridge Reservation were able to get that whole bar, and all the people that own that, they had them moved far away, someplace else in the city.
Okay.
I mean, not far away, but far enough where it wasn't going to be affecting the reservation as much as it had been.
Yeah. The bad side of all that is they get all the problems associated with the alcoholism, but none of the, like say, I'm not advocating for this, but say they were selling the alcohol on the reservation, they would at least have the funds to maybe build treatment centers or things like that. So the problem is they're just getting all the downside on the reservation. Yeah,
nobody's making any money that's actually a part of the Pine Ridge Reservation.
Right.
And so like, they were able to move the bars and the owners, because it was like they were using guerrilla tactics. Every time a beer truck would show up, they were like harassing the heck out of them. And so I mean, apparently it worked. And as far as I know, that they resolved that issue specifically. I'm sure alcoholism is still a big part of it. I mean, I think it was like something like 30% of the kids born on that reservation had fetal alcohol syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, it's really bad. So it's and that's just one example too. You know, there's
Yeah.
lots of other, you know, places. And in fact, like I'm really sad to say that, you know, the band member, the lead singer of Shadow Train, which was the name of the band, because we with this album, I mean, with this documentary, we released a double album worth of music,
Okay.
and so in the documentary, it's the whole band traveling around, and the lead singer Greg Anaya, he passed away
Okay.
in like
Sorry.
2016, I think it was, um, and it was, you know, largely due to alcoholism. So it was one of those things that it was just super tragic ending, and you know, but I mean, positive is that good music came out of it, and hopefully people will look at it and learn something, you know, and understand, you know, just what, you know, the United States has done in terms of breaking treaties and
Oh yeah.
kind of pushing people to the outskirts and trying to forget that they exist, you know.
Yeah. I just kind of interested in I've got a couple of books, I still haven't read them, about the recovery movement among Native Americans,
Mhm.
because um I talked to somebody. They have a Native American General Service Office for in AA. So you
Mhm.
have these Native Americans who are in AA, and I reached out to them because I wanted to talk to them about their recovery and what they're all about. But they didn't want to come talk to me because I'm an atheist and their
Mhm.
spirituality is really important to them.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, man, that's not going to be a problem. I'm still interested. And I asked them, I said, what's the biggest problem with Native Americans in AA? And he said that it's the perception that it's a white man's
Oh,
program
okay, I got it.
is the problem. So they don't necessarily have a problem with going to the meetings per
Yeah.
se, but the problem is that it's a white man's program.
Solution to the,
Yeah,
and probably also the fact that they, you know, I mean, the fire water, you know what I mean, like that
yeah,
you know, Europeans brought alcohol to.
right.
I don't know how accurate that is in terms of, you know, I know beer, for example, has been is dated back, you know, thousands of years. I think, you know what I mean, like shaman monks used to brew beer and stuff. But I think that might be another issue, is the fact that maybe they consider alcohol being part of the problem from the Europeans in the first place, and then,
Yeah,
you know,
Right.
but I mean, I can understand too that they might have an issue with AA also because of the religious component. You know what I mean?
right,
Right.
Because
right.
to them, like, you know, I mean, you know, Europeans would go into church in a building and worship a god, and for Native Americans, like, nature is God, nature is
Right.
all. You know what I mean? And rather than and then having to like subscribe to this higher power as opposed to just being part of all nature, that might be an issue too. I don't know.
Yeah, it's really a complex situation, and also as I was reading like the history of Pine Ridge and what happened is like, okay, so the United States took away all their land. They put them on this little reservation, but the United States said that they would pay them billions of dollars or millions of dollars, but they will not take it because it's their land. All of the Dakotas, I guess, is their land, and so they're living in poverty to this day.
Uh,
Something's got to be done. It's just wrong the way the whole thing historically is played out, and then
yeah.
the problems that they have today is just. I just wish that there could be a little bit more compassion in this country for
Mhm.
our history, because that wouldn't be so difficult to make an amends for, you know.
Right. Oh
And the
no.
people are suffering worse than anything, you know. It's just it's something that our country should really be ashamed of, in my opinion.
Hmm.
It just
Yeah.
bothers me.
No,
Yeah,
definitely, definitely. And the Bureau of Indian Affairs too is there's lots of corruption in that as well.
yeah,
Um, you know, so it's like that, I feel really bad for the people that, you know, are living in poverty and they can't trust, you know, their own people, like the Bureau of Indian Affairs, to allocate money to resources that need to be, you know, uh,
yeah,
which is another whole issue, you know, and it's just, man,
yeah.
terrible.
It was
Wow.
interesting in regards to all this pandemic. I was talking to someone the other day and they were talking, you know, the people who are poor and, you know, homeless and all this, they're really going to get hit by this. And I'm like, yeah, just like every other day of the year, you know,
Mhm.
with
True.
everything else.
Right.
Welcome to reality of thinking about that, you know.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's you know, it's a catastrophic domino effect. I mean, I'm a musician and all my gigs have been canceled. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
like, and so that's, you know, because obviously I get it. You can't bring a lot of people into in a small area, And
Yeah.
being an entertainer, that means like you're supposed to be in front of people entertaining, and you can't do that. So it's a trip. We'll see what happens. I mean, I'm okay right now, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, depending on how long this lasts, it's a
Yeah.
trip.
I hope not long. Gabe,
Yeah.
the counselor in me would love to know. You said you grew up in an alcoholic home. How Dad's alcoholism resolve itself, or how'd his life go, and how'd that affect you? And how's your relationship with your family now since you've been sober?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, everything's, you know, been great with my family. They've always been really supportive. You know, they visited me when I was in jail. A lot of them really didn't even know the extent of what I was doing, you know, how much I was drinking and what drugs I was using. My mom specifically, you know. And then my dad, you know, I was always trying to help him get sober. Um, in 2014, I got a call from the emergency room that he was found outside of his house, face down in a pool of his own blood, because he had gotten so drunk he passed out again in front of his house. And he had, you know, once he got divorced from my mom, he got remarried again. He got another divorce with that wife, so he had like 2 failed marriages. And to him, it was just like it was pretty much like a downward spiral. He also had a cataracts issue. You know, he couldn't see, so I took him to kind of resolve that. And then once he could see, it was better. He was better, but he just kind of used that opportunity to find other ways to kind of start drinking. And he was planning to move to Mexico, because you know it's where family. That's where our family's from. And so he went. My aunt passed away in 2015, and he went to go mourn her with his family, and then he died.
Mm.
So he actually had a heart attack, and you know, he was really overweight, and he was extremely high blood pressure. And so from what I understand, he stopped taking his blood pressure medication. He started drinking coffee, and then he started drinking again pretty heavily while he was down there. And then he just got up in the morning and had a heart attack and was out.
Sorry to hear
So yeah, so you know, I had moments where I was, you know, like pretty hopeful that he might be able to get better. Um, I was trying to be the example, you know, to him, that, you know, we could break the cycle, you know what I mean, and he could have something to look forward to. But yeah, it just didn't work out, and but I mean, you know, I didn't, there was no ill will towards him
No.
at all.
No.
And you know, I talked to him on the phone like a couple days before he passed, and he was, you know, he knew I loved him. I told him I was proud of him regardless of anything.
Mhm.
And so we, you know, at least settled it like that. But it was rough. That was like one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with in my life, is passing my dad, you know.
I bet.
Yeah,
Ben,
especially
Ben has a similar background with his father.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my dad was an alcoholic too. And you said something earlier that like you were kind of just thrown into being an adult because your dad wasn't the adult. So I was wondering too, I kind of found this for myself. Like, I think some of my drinking was to relieve this sense of seriousness or feeling like I always had to be the adult so I could actually cut loose and have my own life and have my own fun, because I probably wasn't able to do that when I was younger because I grew up in an alcoholic home.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a part of it. I think for me specifically too, when I look back on it, and I realized it later, you know, when my dad got drunk, he was an asshole, you know, and he also scared me a lot when I was a kid. You know, when he was drunk, he was just a completely different person. So I was very, very, very against alcohol through my junior high school. And then once I moved in with him, it was kind of like, if you can't beat him, join him kind of thing.
Right.
And then I realized that, you know, like when I was drinking and I was drunk, I wasn't scared of him anymore. That fear of him, he was like way less, you know, he just didn't look like the monster that I remember him as a kid, you know. And then also I wanted to outdrink him. I wanted to try to outdrink him to prove that you didn't have to be an asshole when you got drunk. And so like I went out of my way to just try to like outdrink him, and, you know, he'd be passed out, and, you know, I try to get him back up. Let's keep drinking, you know, like even in the morning when he was all hungover, you know, I try to get him back up. Let's keep drinking, you know, like just kind of egging him on and being an asshole. And then throwing parties at the house all the time, having people over drinking till like 3 or 4 in the morning on days he had to work. And then he'd come to, you know, yell at me about that. And I just be like, you know, you're really going to come at me about this? You know, like you've been drunk all my childhood.
Yeah.
So it was really, we were butting heads, and it was an aggressive thing. And I was unfair and mean, and, you know, totally unnecessary. You know, obviously now I look back on it as an adult, you know, but that was definitely part of it, you know.
But I would imagine that also set you up to always have a very conflicted feeling about your own drinking on some level too.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like it was okay. And I felt like, you know, it was just growing up was just part of life, you know, because I mean, not ever, I don't want to just generalize Mexicans, you know, but it's like when you have the family over and like specifically we had family friends that would come over and they'd always bring a bottle of tequila and it would literally end up everybody passed out, like sprawled out around the house.
Right.
And that was just kind of like the vibe. Like that's like what we did, you know, and
Right.
growing up all through high school. And it's like, yeah, when, you know, the compadres are coming over, we're going to drink tequila and everybody's going to get trashed and pass out all over the house. And I was like, being blackout drunk was like part of, you know, being an adolescent, I guess, you know. Like,
So kudos to you, Gabe, because all those things you're saying, those are all extra obstacles for somebody to get sober, to have to pull away from all that conditioning and all that, you know, what you've been accustomed to. So great for you, man.
thank you so much.
You're bringing a lot of beauty and positivity into the world.
Thank you,
Yeah,
guys.
thank you.